This is part 64 of JavaScript tutorial. In this video, we'll discuss how to implement polymorphism in JavaScript with an example. Object-oriented programming languages like C# and Java support polymorphism. First, let's look at a C# example, and then we'll see how to implement the same thing in JavaScript. Let's flip to Visual Studio. Within the code behind file of this webform1.aspx, let's create a shape class. This shape class is going to contain a public virtual method which is going to return a string, and let's name this method draw. The reason we made this method virtual because we want the derived classes to be able to override this method. So this method is simply going to return a string saying I am a generic shape. Now let's create another class. Let's name this circle, and this class is going to inherit from the shape class, and this class is going to override the draw method which it is going to inherit from the shape class. And the overridden draw method within the circle class is simply going to return a string saying I am a circle. Now let's create another class. Let's name this class square, and this class is also going to inherit from shape, and this is also going to override the draw method, and the overridden draw method within the square class is simply going to return a string saying I am a square. Now let's create another class, public class, and let's name this class triangle, and this class is also going to inherit from shape, but this class is not going to override the draw method. So at the moment we've got 4 different classes: shape, circle, square, and triangle. Shape class is the base for all the other 3 classes. Within circle and square class we have overridden the draw method, but within triangle class we didn't override the draw method. Now within the page load event, let's create a shape array. Let's name the variable shapes, and this array is going to contain 4 shape objects. First, a new shape object itself, and then a new circle, and then a new square, and then finally a new triangle. And then let's use a for each loop. So for each shape in the shapes array that we have just created, so within this shapes array we've got 4 shape objects. So on each of the shape object, call the draw method, and whatever response we get, we want that to write to the web page. So let's use Response.Write, and then to the response let's go ahead and append an HTML break as well, so the output of each method is displayed on a separate line. So let's go ahead and run this and inspect the output that we get. Look at the result. It says I am a generic shape, I am a circle, I am a square, and then finally again it says I am a generic shape. So first, the object that we have within the array is the shape object itself. Shape object has this draw method which is going to return the string I am a generic shape. So that's what gets printed. And the second object that we have is circle. So the circle object also has the draw method. So circle object has overridden the draw method, and it returns the string I am a circle. That's why circle object says I am a circle. The next object is square. So square also has overridden the draw method, so that's why it says I am a square. And the last object within the array is the triangle object, and if you look at the triangle class, it didn't override the draw method. As a result, it ends up using the base class draw method, which says I am a generic shape. So the triangle object, when you invoke draw method, it ends up using the base class method, and that is the reason it says I am a generic shape. Now we know that JavaScript is also an object-oriented programming language. So JavaScript also supports the concept of polymorphism. So let's see how to implement the same example in JavaScript. So within this HTML page, let's first create a shape object. So shape function, And basically this shape object is going to have a draw method. So shape.prototype.draw equals function, and the draw method within the shape object is simply going to return a string saying I am a generic shape. Now let's create a circle object where circle equals function, and for the circle object we want the shape object to be the parent. So circle.prototype equals object.create, and we are going to use the shape object's prototype. So basically here we are saying, for the circle class, the parent is going to be the shape object. Since shape is the parent for the circle, it inherits this draw method, but we want the circle to override the draw method. So circle.prototype.draw equals function. So here we are going to override the draw method within the circle object, and the draw method within the circle object is going to return this string saying I am a circle. So let's make a copy of this and then create a square object. So now let's change the name to square. So here we have the square object. The parent for the square object also is going to be the shape object, and within the square object we are going to override the draw method, and the overridden draw method within the square object is going to return this string saying I am a square. Now finally let's go ahead and create the triangle object. So let's change this name to triangle, and even for triangle the parent is going to be the shape object, but the triangle object is not going to override the draw method. Okay, so now let's go ahead and create a shapes array. So where shapes equals, so first we want to create a new shape object itself, then a new circle, then a new square, and then a new triangle. Now let's use a for each loop on this shapes array object. So shapes.foreach. So for each shape object that is present in this shapes array, we want to call a function and then pass the shape object to that function. And what we want this function to do with that shape object is call the draw method, and whatever response we get, we want to write that to the web page. So I'm going to use document.write shape object.draw method, and then let's also append an HTML break so we get the response of each method on a separate line. Alright, so with all these changes, let's go ahead and run this now. So look at this, we are on HTML page 1.htm. So it says now I'm a generic shape, I'm a circle, I'm a square, and again I'm a generic shape. So basically we have these four objects within this array. The first one is the shape object itself. When the draw method within the shape object is called, it will call this method, and it says I am a generic shape. And then we have this circle object which has overridden the draw method, and the overridden method says I am a circle. So when we call draw on the circle object, it says I am a circle. Similarly, square has overridden it, so we get I am a square. But if you look at triangle, it didn't override the draw method. So the triangle object ends up using the parent object's draw method. The parent object is shape object, and the shape object's draw method says I am a generic shape. So the output is I am a generic shape when the object is triangle. It is the same example that we just discussed. Thank you for listening and have a great day.